Okay, everybody, welcome to today's Midnight training session on alternative program integrations with Midnight. Today we'll be touching on 5 different elements of other programs that tie into Midnight's functionality that are not necessarily part of the initial package. We'll be covering the inventory app, as well as our ShopFloor Data Collection software, a brief look at our API integration, a description on how to have our users access the customer portal to track their data, and also a brief explanation on integration into accounting packages such as QuickBooks. To start things off, I'll go over a brief explanation of our inventory application. Under the warehouse, you have the ability to simply add, modify contents of, and receive inventory. If you were to jump into an item, you can see some of the core data about it, such as the name, code, type, quantity on hand, and other basic information. You can also see that we can store a photo with our item. If you don't wish to specifically utilize the system for adding data all through the interface, you can instead utilize the inventory application to get that info plugged into the system by force. This does require that you have a package of Midnight which includes the inventory app, so this may not necessarily pertain to anything that your default or current package utilizes. To jump into our inventory application itself, you'll see that I'm referencing a share of my own iPhone here to show how it works. If you were to open up the inventory app itself, when attempting to log in, you would set your credentials to your username and password that you would use to get into the site normally. And for the site address, you'll be utilizing this instance with everything matching to what you'd expect it to, as seen on screen, with the exception of the case of your site name itself. In this case, my support refers to my support website. You could replace your website with your own instance to attempt to connect to your own data. After plugging in your information, by tapping Save, you commit the data and log yourself in. From here, you can either create new inventory by clicking Create at the bottom, allowing you to set up a new customer instance populated by the list of customers in your system. You can give your inventory an item type, as well as a default name. Oops. You can plug in a base quantity and a default location to plug that quantity into. If you'd like to add an image, you can take a picture by tapping the camera icon and actually taking a photo of the item in question. And lastly, you can add a comment just for some core information regarding the item itself. Once all this info is set, you can click the Submit button to commit your item to the system. Now, if you were to try to find the item record itself, you can either punch in the item ID itself for the item, see details on the item you have, and the location in which those quantities for said item exist in your system. You can also add inventory or subtract or pull inventory, making this an effective tool for your warehouse and production team to track and relocate goods as necessary as they go through their day-to-day work for any jobs. If you were to say need to plug inventory into your system, you could either take advantage of our barcode scanner to scan an instance of the barcode for the item that may be printed on an item label, or you could simply type in the item code to pull it up as needed. In this case, if I take advantage of my barcode button, you'll see it pops up the camera. As I pull into the barcode itself, it plugs my item data in immediately. My details of my number 9 window envelope carry through. You can do the same with your location, either by typing in the location itself from the drop-down, or by using the barcode to scan the location barcode itself. You can assign inventory to an order to make it available only for that order. Plug in your quantity received or added. Click Submit to commit it. So now if we were to look up our item once more, we can see that we have a new count of that quantity for that item available at the new location. Finally, we can pull inventory going through a similar process. Typically, this process would allow you to mark whether or not items have been pulled against a job. When pulling inventory from the system, the only locations that pop up are ones in which you have a count already associated with. In this case, you can, of course, tie to your order. Plug in your pulled quantity and commit that. So now we can confirm that we've pulled inventory by actually looking at any of our documentation within Midnight itself. Finally, to change who we're logged in as, or to simply log out of the inventory app, you can click the Settings button to pull yourself back to the primary screen. This allows you to reset your web address, your username, and password. Now, if we return back to our main screen, under the inventory module, we can jump into the instance of our item, modify the naming conventions of it as necessary, update the status of it to say whether or not it's globally available or not. And we can also check and see our quantities, any of our stock that's currently sitting in locations, and the history of all transactions made, noting that anything done through a mobile app will have the mobile tag in front of it. To get the barcodes for this system, you can either open up the reports from within the item to pull the item label, or you can do it en masse from within the reports module. And the same thing goes with the inventory location. You can print your locations tag report to get a full barcoded list of all of the locations that you have in your system. So this way, instead of typing in your location for adding or pulling inventory from, you can simply scan it by using your iDevice's camera. That covers our inventory app. Next, we'll take a look at our ShopFloor Data Collection system. In an order, you can jog time against your work by actually going into the job costing module and placing time entries for your specific users against an individual task. You can also do it from within the dynamic job board by clicking the actual time for your particular service and then viewing your job detail reports after plugging in your time entries. We've covered those in other sessions. So this time, we'll take a look at our ShopFloor instance. If you have our ShopFloor package, then you'll be able to access this by typing into your website URL the ShopFloor, followed by the name of your organization, .vsmidnight.com. You'll be brought to this website, which, although correct, is not properly formatted. If you try to use this on your iPhone or on your iPad, you'll see that the website will be formatted differently in a much more user-friendly appearance. By utilizing an extension for Chrome called a user agent spoofer, you can download and install this and use it to change your Chrome's default processing view into that which would mimic an iPad. You'll see now we have a different interface, which is much more user-friendly and much more similar to what we would assume to see on an iPad. Do be aware that other sites that you continue to visit, such as your other core Midnight sites, or even other social sites such as Facebook or YouTube, will be displayed in their mobile view as long as the UA spoofer is active. So when you're done with ShopFloor, be sure to disable this by resetting your Chrome default as the view method. Under here to start, you'll log in with your employee code. Your employee code is identified under an employee number by looking at the kiosk code under the job tracking subtab. In this case, my name on this site, 42574, logs me in. So that way I can now job in and job out, or clock in and clock out depending on my shift. The clock in and clock out controls are determined based on your employee account's shift data. This is controlled under your admin under shift. For any shifts that you have, you can have a start time and end time, as well as applicable break times plugged in. So that way a calculated break will trigger if you click the break button. To switch employees, you can click Switch Employee at the top, which simply does a trigger to have you log in with a new employee number. And to log out brings you all the way back out, in which you'll need a full ShopFloor user account to log back in and allow usage of kiosk codes once more. The core feature in this is our Job In element. Under this, you'll have a view with an adjustable data filter that allows you to search for any of your jobs and the work associated with them in a very quick acting filter process. In here, after doing a filter or scrolling down to pull the job that you're looking for, you can tap the job with your mouse or your finger on an iPad. Click into any particular task that you're working on. Select any machinery that's associated with the particular task. And then once you're in through the machine, you can plug in a start count and any details or comments associated with your particular task. Clicking OK logs your forced instance into the system, and now you can either job out of that particular task or job into another. Back in our employee list, you can have employees designated to log into only one task at a time, or multiple, by controlling the fact of how many jobs they can log into through this multiple jobs checkbox and the maximum number of jobs they can log in through. Under here, I'll job in a second time. Now, if I were to job out, with 2 jobs available, I can job out of one particular task as I choose, giving me the option to fill in a stopping count, a status to update the dynamic job board with to change from in progress to whatever I feel is appropriate for the status. Alternatively, I could simply click complete to mark my work as complete, updating the dynamic status above to completed. I could also add other comments in or mark my work as rework to calculate against the job as a properly costed expense. And I can click OK to commit it. I can now see that I've got a brief period of time that I've worked on this job. And by clicking OK, you slate it into the system and can view it under the job costing module. With our other task, since it's the last one that I have left in the system that I'm logged into, if I click job out, it brings me straight into it, where I can log my work against it, update the progress, click OK, and commit it to get another time entry into the system. Now back in our main system, I can go into the job costing module, and I can see that all of the work I just did for this order 1615 is available in full detail, including information that shows the exact time and date that I jumped in, and my initials to confirm that it was my account that did the data punch. Of course, if you need to edit this information, you can always change it from within here. Be sure that if you're editing your time, you update your start time and end time so that way your calculation matches. Finally, if I edit my employee record to allow user clock-in methods, I can, instead of jobbing in and job out, force a clock in and clock out before. By clicking this checkbox for kiosk time clock required, it makes it so I have to clock in before I can job into any tasks. At this point now, I can click clock in to quickly clock myself into the system with a timestamp. And now I can begin my job in and job out process as I normally would before. I can also click break at any point to commit a break for myself based on any breaks available within the shift that I'm set up with. And when done, I can click clock out to officially clock myself out with a timestamp. Like the job in data, if you have data entered in incorrectly, That can be also adjusted within the main Midnight interface by going into the job costing module and into your time records list to update your start time and your date and your out time and your date. So that way you log yourself being clocked in and clocked out for the appropriate time length. Say in this case I was clocked in for 6 hours. I took no break, and then I can save and close the commit. Now we do have quite a few reports that base themselves on this data. I'll set up one quick instance to go over our more complex reports. As I job into any incomplete task, I can make it so that way my status for being jobbed in and clocked in could be always made available. Under the main reports module, we can see our job costing reports. Starting from the top, our active job detail, a report that shows who it is that is currently jobbed into a particular task, when they started, how much time has yet been completed, and other core information on the work they're working on. We also have the employee detailed time clock report, which based on the time range can show whoever's been clocked in or clocked out to work for a specific period of time. In this case, myself, for the adjusted 6 hours. There's the employee timesheet report, which is fairly similar, but shows a summarized 40-hour work week calculated list of regular plus overtime hours. And there's the service detailed time clock report, which allows you to see a list of all committed work done by a particular user after they've jobbed out of any particular task that they were working on. You'll see here the sum of the two jobs I worked on total to 12 minutes. And we can change our search criteria to look for different employees or within different date ranges for pretty much all of these reports. If you look at a job's job detail analysis report, the information will be retroactively placed after any work is completed onto the direct labor cost section of the report. You'll see a calculated labor expense summed up based on the total of all worked time done by any employees against the job, listing themselves in chronologically ascending order. If you have any rework that comes out of a particular task, that would be expected to be marked into the system as an issue. Under the issue for that job, you can log the issue expense, and then you can fill out more details as to why the rework happened, along with giving yourselves an appropriate cost so you can track your expenses associated with the reworked issue. Finally, the ShopFloor application is usable only effectively in Chrome applications. If you use a desktop version of Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox, or if you use your iPad or iPhone's default Safari web browser, there are formatting and logic issues which may cause changes in behavior. So we recommend that you only use Chrome. when utilizing the ShopFloor app. Next, we'll be looking at Midnight's API integration. If your package allows you, you have the ability to sync your program up with alternative programs such as BCC or WindowBook, as well as other storefront-based applications like Procero, PagePath, and other similar programs. To start on that, you'd need to look into your admin menu under the Global Settings list. Under here, you can see if you have a site token. If your website does not have a site token, then you don't have integration with our API established. If I were to look at another one of our sample sites, I can check in my admin menu and see that I do have a site token in this example. We'll check this one instead. Whether or not your site token is available is absolutely key, as other programs that connect to your websites utilizing site token data require it in order to sync up properly or at all. Strange, it's not showing in this case. All right, we'll avoid this for now. As far as the API integration methods go, typically when you're setting up any kind of data transfer, you'll have a group of files that get plugged into Midnight, sort of like they're being injected in through the back end and forced into the tables to be made visible onto the front. If your application, such as Procero, already does this, then all you need to do is give them your access via site token, along with core ID information. ID information will relate to your services and customers by referencing the number or the ID number that's associated with them. For other cases like customers where the ID isn't readily available or immediately visible, you can tell by looking in the website address to see what the ID instances are for most common areas. If you're running our API to adjust data in the system rather than add new data, you can also take advantage of our order IDs and estimate IDs to modify that info. One thing to be aware of is that if you're working with orders, you'll need to update the version ID as well as order ID. Some of that information is not available on screen. For instance, the order ID, but this is not the version ID, are visible in the URL. We have a core website that allows you to plug data in manually. This is our web service instance of data plug. Under here, you can simply select from a list of drop-downs which method of API data integration you'd like to utilize. If you do have our API integration package, you will have a list or group of these files already available. In my case, and in your case, if you're unfamiliar with what they look like, you can look at our sample list of XML files which you'll have provided. Jumping into, say, order new, it allows me to see a breakout of our XML method, which includes just some sample information to show what the IDs, dates, and other text values would need to be formatted as in order to properly integrate into the system. Along with our integration package is a guide. This guide is a pretty large one, touching at just a little over 100 pages. It gives you a full breakdown on all of the different XML files that we just saw, along with a very effective explanation as to how to make it do what you want to do. You'll see a list for each available operation, any data elements that you can tie into your particular XML file. Most of these respond to the fields that you'll see on screen. For instance, customer ID references the customer, due date references the order header's due date, shipping information and billing references the order's shipping and billing tab and the information from within there. And depending on the other versions of API files that you wish to work with imports on, you'll see a description for all of them broken out here. There isn't just a way to plug data into the system too. You can also use our retrieve data, so that way you can pull information out of the system. This would typically be required if you are, say, trying to export a list of all of your services, or perhaps a list of all of your orders within a time period. When attempting to import a file, you'll need to select your file from the Choose File list after picking your method that you'd like to work with. In this case, for my Order New operation, I'll select my Order New XML, which I've populated with information here to show my customer ID of 10006, an order date and due date established, some core shipping and billing information, project name, a few other fields, and a service. By clicking Submit, if everything works fine, you'll have the returned code for your errors list equal to 0. You'll be given the order number, in this case, of the new order that was created. And if you log back into your main site, you'll be able to see the order itself as it was plugged into the system. The data from here loads my customer ID of XYZ Investments. You'll see my job name and version name carry in properly, as well as my date and due date. My entered by name is Midnight WS. In this case, WS stands for Web Services and relates to the API integration method that we just used. And my service is plugged in because I had a properly designated service ID, along with prices, details, and quantities to calculate out to what everything needs to be selected as. This can be done en masse, so if you have one file listed in such a way with multiple orders worth of data, you can copy this list down and paste it, say, 3 times, allowing you to import 3 orders worth of data into the system. You'd be aware that entering data through the API is a difficult feature to completely control. For instance, if you do make a mistake in typing your customer ID, one of your service IDs, or anything else that references some option available within a drop-down menu, you may be stuck with information that doesn't necessarily sync up with what you'd have on screen. In those cases, your drop-down menus will either not have data displayed properly, or in a method that simply won't match. The next area I'll touch on is our customer portal. Under any instances of your customers, if you have our portal system active, you can go into that customer record and create an account for your customer to log in and track their estimates, orders, inventory, current postage balances, and proofs. Under the Portal tab, you can see different usernames that you can plug in. And you can also give the customer or the login representative for that customer access to specific modules within your site. This is simply a list of data that they're allowed to see, but they do not have the ability to edit. And other than the quote request option, there is no way for a user to look at the customer portal and try to give you any kind of modification to what they see based on what you have. If you need to create a new user, simply type in their first and last name along with a username and password, which can be adjusted by clicking the edit button. Do be aware that usernames cannot be identical between different clients. So if you have, say, a Scott Smith, you cannot have S. Smith for this organization and then an S. Smith for another organization. If you were to go to the login instance for the customer portal, it would be yourwebsite.vsclient.com, in which case your user would log in with the credentials that you've given them. So they can jump in and see any of the info that they need to. Under here, this mobile-friendly view can be used to allow customers to quickly access their customer service core data of estimates and orders, allowing them to see open and closed orders and details on them. They can also look at a quick view of their order status, run operations in a search filter, and utilize the request a quote option to send emails to any contact or representative that's associated with this customer, and picking themselves as the representative. So that way they can send in any documentation, files, or other important information for you to use. V2 dropdown here is populated by the customer's default CSR and sales rep. And the from is populated by any of the business emails for contacts that are live within the system. They can also view their active inventory. Under here, if a customer has specific inventory assigned to their name and nobody else's, they can see any quantities they have on hand, as well as a photo of the item. Like in the other screen, they can do a search filter if they have a lot of inventory that you carry, so they can monitor the status of all items in their system. There's also the postage, which allows a customer to see how much money is sitting in escrow for their account, how much money is earmarked against specific orders, and what their current outstanding balance is for unpaid jobs. Finally, we have our proofs list. Under here, if a proof has been generated through Midnight and sent out to a customer, the status of that is tracked and made available through here. The customer can jump in to the proof, approve or reject it, re-upload a new file for themselves to provide to you, or check out the file once again to see what it was that you sent them. If they approve it through here, then the proof is committed as approved. And under the Proofs module within Tools of Midnight, we can see that our proof has had its status changed. In the case of doing it through the system, you'll receive an email pop-up that lets you know which organization approved which proof. Finally, I'll go over a brief explanation of our accounting integration process. Within the admin menu, you have a lot of core options to control how your data gets exported out of Midnight and into an accounting package. To start, under your global settings, you'll have your blue accounting integration button. By clicking this, you can pick and choose which accounting program you have and fill out any core information associated with that program. In this case, for QuickBooks, you have some core info on your accounts receivable and payable, which can be either text or numbers if your accounts are, say, 5-digit numbers. And you can also pick and choose what types of transactions your purchase orders get imported in for the system. There are other integration methods for other programs, such as our Sage Peachtree integrations, our Macala integration, and a few others. So pick and choose which ones are useful for you. Noting that if you do utilize a Sage program such as Peachtree, the version that you have may not necessarily be compatible with the version that we have in our system due to Sage updating their import methods with each version annually. You can also control whether or not your orders within the system get locked after export by checking the lock order after export to accounting system box in the estimates orders pop-out. Under here, if you check this, it makes it so only an administrator or one of our Midnight global users can make modifications to the program's order. It's an effective way to prevent jobs from being modified after they've been pushed into QuickBooks, which makes it so long-term accounting numbers typically don't have any outstanding issues. The information that gets plugged out of the system derives itself from the account GLID list. This account's GLID list should sync up with your QuickBooks' chart of accounts. Within QuickBooks, you can access that list by going to your lists and chart of accounts here or hitting Control-A. Primarily what you'll wish to have in the system are any of your sales accounts, including taxes and inventory info. If you have accounts that are, say, for income or other expenses, you may not necessarily need to add them into Midnight, as we don't currently export those when they're tied to invoices. You can assign these GLIDs to your tax jurisdictions within your estimates and orders list by providing the GL account for each appropriate tax code. And also within the services themselves, you can assign a GL account. This GL information is what ties info from Midnight into QuickBooks and properly designates the funds associated from those items to their respective accounts. You also have the item code, which can be tied to your sales as well. This list is populated by your account item code here. And will come from your QuickBooks item list account to let you know what item codes you need to include in your system. To identify a sub-account, the way to separate that out would be to simply place a colon, separating your two numbers from each other. For instance, instead of my screen printing items here, I may have 3 different instances of screen printing. In this case now, I have a sub-account that I can associate with a service. So that way, under my screen printing items list, I can have a different classification of service and expense tracking. Under the orders themselves, if you have an order that's closed, or if you have an order that is marked as prepay, that order can be plugged out of Midnight and into your accounting system. For instance, 1570 is available to push out, but I'll look at 1610 as well. The prepay checkbox under the Details tab, which can be defaulted on the customer level, is what determines if a customer's job can be pushed out of the system early or before a close date is plugged in. And after a job has been pushed out, the AR export date here populates to let you know when it was exported from the system. In this case now, if I go to my orders quick links and click Accounting Export, I'll be brought into my export screen where I can see by default my not yet exported jobs, updating it to include my exported or zero balance orders, or by doing a search filter range or company range. And I can also pick and choose whether or not my import file is a single invoice per file, or if multiple jobs are consolidated into one file. In this case, for just a single job, by clicking this instance and clicking the Save and Close button, I can click the Export Now to receive a file that allows me to import this into QuickBooks and get my invoice logged in the system. Do note that you can modify these files after they've been saved to your system. You can open them in Excel, or you can open them in Notepad to preserve formatting. By opening this in Notepad, I can see my customer info, service and line item information, and a full breakdown of everything else that's associated with a customer's job data in the format that properly designates itself to the right accounts, whether it be postage, tax, or service info within QuickBooks when I do the file import. To get this data into your system of QuickBooks' invoicing program, you can simply do a File, Utilities, Import IIF file, where you're given the choice to scroll to your location of choice and actually select the file that you'd like to import into the system. Alternatively, under the accounting package, if you're using QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online, you have access to a purchase order export or a postage check export. Under the purchase order export, you have a similar interface. The difference for these items are that inventory doesn't have a dedicated GL ID associated with them. And for the purchase orders themselves, you'll need to enter the line items via the Details tab and actually punch in a GL account yourself for each respective item. Finally is the postage check export. As you receive checks through your Tools module, you can push those checks out from Midnight and then into your QuickBooks. In this case, each check will go to the customer's respective funds account. And just like the others, if you do a File, Utilities, Import IF file, you'll be given the ability to push this into QuickBooks, either one at a time or multiple at a time. So that way your balances in QuickBooks continue to add and subtract as you pull the funds out and in from QuickBooks into Midnight, or vice versa. All right, that's everything for our alternative integrations session. I'll go ahead and place everyone back off of mute and open up for Q&A.